I didn't believe in fate. I believed in systems. And systems don't call you at midnight to tell you your entire life is a lie. The phone rang once. I almost ignored it. My screen was filled with live satellite data, flood zones blinking red along the Texas coast. Shelters were over capacity. Medical shipments were delayed. Every second mattered. Then a calm male voice said my name, my full name, like he'd been saying it his entire life. "Elena Moore," he said. "Your grandfather is dying. He wants to see you before it's too late." That was the moment my perfectly organized world cracked. Before I go on, tell me something. Where are you listening from right now? Because this story didn't just happen in one place. It followed me across states, across systems, across a past that was never supposed to exist. I'm 33 years old. I lead emergency logistics for a federal disaster response agency. When hurricanes destroy cities, I'm the one who decides where the water goes, where the generators land, which hospital gets power first. I don't guess. I don't feel. I calculate. That's how I survived. I grew up in Indiana's foster system. No parents, no relatives, no photos. My file was thin and final, parents unknown. By 18, I aged out. By 25, I'd built a career based on one principle: order never abandons you. People do. Systems don't. That's why the call made no sense. "I think you have the wrong number," I said, already turning back toward my command screen. "I don't have a grandfather." "You do," the man replied. "Robert Hale, shipping magnate, New England." I laughed, short, dry, humorless. I was an orphan. My records are sealed. There was a pause. Not uncertainty. Patience. "My name is Nathan Caldwell," he said. "I'm Mr. Hale's attorney. And you're right. Your records are sealed, especially the juvenile court incident from 2002, the one where the judge called you Ellie and you threw a paper cup at the bailiff." My hand froze. No one knew that. Not my supervisors. Not my therapists. Not even the version of the file I was allowed to see. "How do you know that?" I asked quietly. "Because Mr. Hale has been monitoring your life for a very long time." I stepped away from the operations floor. My pulse was suddenly louder than the alarms. "You're saying a billionaire watched me grow up in state care and did nothing?" I said. "That's not protection, that's cruelty." "He insists it was for your safety," Caldwell replied, "and he believes you'll understand when you see the house." The word house landed wrong. Then my fingers brushed the chain under my uniform, something I never removed, even against protocol. A small, heavy pendant. A metal falcon with wings spread wide. On the back, 2 initials etched deep. Not my name, not more. That symbol had followed me from the foster home. No note, no explanation. Oh, just proof that I existed before the system renamed me. "You have 48 hours, Caldwell said. "Hale Point Estate, Maine." I looked back at the screens. The storm, the shelters, the people waiting on decisions only I could make. "I'm in the middle of a federal emergency," I said. "And Mr. Hale is in the middle of dying," he answered. "This may be your only chance to ask why." People die every day. That's what I told myself. But files don't reopen themselves. I reassigned my deputy, logged out of the system, broke protocol for the first time in my career. As I walked out into the thick Texas humidity, one thought wouldn't let go. If my life was designed, who designed it? And what were they so afraid I'd discover? I left my post without ceremony. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just a clean handoff and a signature in the system that felt heavier than any disaster report I'd ever filed. The jet waiting for me was private, silent, efficient, everything I had never been allowed to want. As the coastline fell away beneath the clouds, I tried to tell myself this was just another anomaly to be resolved, but anomalies don't come with estates. Hale Point rose out of the Maine fog like a deliberate statement. Not warmth, not welcome. Endurance. White stone, sharp lines, iron gates that closed behind the car with a final sound that echoed in my chest. The ocean crashed somewhere beyond the cliffs, distant but constant, like a warning that never slept. Nathan Caldwell met me at the door. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't ask how I felt. He treated me the way I treated crises, with controlled urgency. "He wanted you to see the house first," he said. "The inside was colder than the air outside. Marble floors, high ceilings, No family photos. No warmth. Just history arranged to impress and intimidate. I noticed immediately what was missing. No childhood portraits, no holidays, no signs of a life lived with people instead of power. We walked down a long corridor, my boots sounding wrong against the polished stone. Then we stopped. The painting dominated the far wall. It took my breath before my mind could catch up. It was me. Not a portrait, an event, a disaster site from years ago. Floodwaters, National Guard trucks, pallets of bottled water being unloaded under emergency lights. And there I was in the center, back turned slightly, arm raised, giving orders. Even the tight braid at the nape of my neck was right, the reflective tape on my jacket, the exhaustion in my posture. That photo ran briefly in the press, Nathan said behind me. Mr. Hale had it commissioned. I didn't turn around. My skin prickled. He didn't save that moment, I said slowly. He curated it. Yes. The word landed like a confession. That was when it shifted. This wasn't pride. This wasn't remorse. This was observation. A man who had watched me from a distance and decided when to intervene and when to let the system do its damage. How long? I asked. 30 years, Nathan said. I thought of the winter coat that arrived at my foster home when I was 13. Brand new. My size. No note. I thought of the textbooks that showed up when I was 16, shipped from a university I'd never applied to. We called those things luck. They weren't. They were surveillance. Nathan led me into a smaller room lined with records. On the wall was a bronze plaque bearing the same falcon symbol I wore around my neck. Beneath it, a name I had never seen in full. Lydia Hale. My mother? The word felt foreign, like trying on a language I wasn't allowed to speak. She never died, Nathan said. She vanished. He showed me the files. Not sentimental ones, operational ones. Lydia Hale had been the head of cold chain logistics at Hale Maritime. Brilliant, precise, and the first person to notice irregularities in shipping routes that didn't match their manifests. She discovered a laundering operation, Nathan continued. High-value tech concealed as medical aid. It was being run through Crane Global Shipping. Victor Crane, Robert Hale's brother-in-law. The betrayal wasn't sudden, it was methodical, and Lydia had documented all of it. They threatened her, Nathan said. Then they discovered she had a child. Me. My stomach dropped. To protect you, he went on, Robert and Lydia agreed to erase you. Legally, completely. New identity, new state, no bloodline, no trace. I laughed once. It came out sharp and wrong. You don't protect a child by turning her into a ghost. It was the only option, Nathan said quietly. I stared at the files, at the clean language used to describe my disappearance. Relocation, identity suppression, containment. I wasn't loved away. I was hidden. Not because I was weak, but because I was leverage. Every unanswered birthday, every empty visiting room, every night I believed no one had chosen me. It wasn't neglect, it was strategy. I reached for the falcon pendant without realizing it. Suddenly, it wasn't just a mystery, it was a mark. Proof that someone had known where I was and decided when I was allowed to exist. Where is he now? I asked. Nathan met my eyes. Waiting. And for the first time since the call, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was afraid of what it would cost to confront the people who decided my life was an acceptable sacrifice. Robert Hale died at dawn. No dramatic last words. No reconciliation. Just a quiet flatline behind closed doors, and the sound of the ocean outside the estate continuing as if nothing had changed. I stood in the hallway while staff moved with rehearsed efficiency, already transitioning from caretakers to witnesses. Power does that. It reorganizes people before grief has time to settle. Victor Crane arrived before the body was cold. He didn't look at me when he entered the library. He didn't have to. Confidence like his didn't need acknowledgement. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored, grief arranged neatly across his face like a practiced expression. Madeline Crane followed him, heels sharp against the floor, eyes scanning the room as if inventorying what was now hers. Nathan stood beside me, still, alert. We'll proceed quickly, Victor said, placing a folder on the table. Robert made revisions, signed them last night. I watched his hands. They didn't shake. They didn't. The document was clean. Too clean. Fresh ink. Heavy legal language. A complete restructuring of the estate. Victor named executor, Madeline beneficiary. No mention of me beyond a single line questioning my legitimacy. She appeared unexpectedly, Victor said smoothly. A stranger in a moment of vulnerability. We believe my brother-in-law was manipulated. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. Robert had been heavily medicated. I'd seen it. Confused, drifting in and out. He'd barely known what day it was. He couldn't have reviewed this, I said. Victor finally looked at me. A thin smile. Are you a doctor now? No, I replied. I coordinate logistics in disaster zones. I know what impaired decision-making looks like. And this, I tapped the signature page, doesn't pass. Madeline laughed softly. You're emotional, understandable, but emotion doesn't invalidate a will. Nathan stepped forward. We'll be requesting an immediate capacity review and a forensic ink analysis. Victor's smile didn't move. Of course you will. That was when I understood. This wasn't opportunism. This was prepared. By afternoon, rumors were already circulating. Calls from journalists I'd never spoken to. A narrative forming fast. Orphan claims billionaire lineage. Appears at deathbed. Disputes will. A familiar story. Easy to sell. They weren't just taking the estate. They were erasing me again, this time publicly. I didn't fight it head-on. I never did. I looked sideways. That night, I drove south along the coast, past private docks marked with discreet signage and security cameras angled just slightly away from the water. Hale maritime manifests had always been precise, predictable. But the recent data Nathan slipped me showed deviations. Containers flagged as medical aid rerouted off schedule, unloaded at ports that didn't make sense. Patterns don't lie. People do. The private port was quiet when I arrived. Fog pressed low against the lights. I kept to the shadows, counting steps, listening. A container door creaked open. Voices. Men who thought they were alone. I recognized the markings on the crate immediately. Aid codes. Emergency seals. They were empty. A voice behind me said my name. I didn't flinch. I'd felt her presence before I heard it. Don't turn around yet, she said. They're not finished. Her voice was older than I expected. Controlled. Familiar in a way that hurt. When it was safe, I turned. She stood beneath a floodlight, hair pulled back, face sharper than the photos in the file. No fear, no hesitation. Lydia, my mother. She didn't rush me. She didn't apologize. She simply met my eyes like someone who had waited years for this moment and refused to waste it. They never stopped, she said. They just got quieter. I wanted to scream, to demand explanations that were 30 years overdue. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Are they still moving product? Yes, she said. And now they think they own everything. We stood there in the cold, the sound of the sea swallowing everything unsaid. Two women shaped by the same machine, meeting not as mother and daughter, but as witnesses. They think I'm gone again, I said. Lydia's mouth tightened, not in fear, but resolve. Then let them, she replied. That's when they make mistakes. Behind us, the container doors slammed shut. And I understood something with perfect clarity. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was an active operation. And they had underestimated the one variable they never fully controlled. Me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand chandeliers, no sweeping marble, just wood, flags, and a judge who looked like he'd seen enough powerful people panic to recognize the sound before it happened. The air carried that sterile quiet that exists only where truth is about to collide with money. Victor Crane sat 3 seats down from me, posture perfect, jaw set. Madeline leaned toward him, whispering confidence like armor. They didn't look worried. They looked prepared. Nathan did not. That should have scared them. The judge called the hearing to order. Emergency motion, asset dispute, questions of capacity and fraud. I watched Victor's attorney lay out his argument with polished certainty, claims of manipulation, emotional instability, an orphan inventing a story to force her way into a fortune she didn't understand. I didn't react. I'd learned long ago that systems listen best when you don't interrupt them. When it was Nathan's turn, he stood slowly, adjusted his cufflinks, and did something unexpected. He smiled. Your Honor, he said, before we debate intent, capacity, or character, we need to discuss a mechanism my client, Mr. Robert Hale, installed 25 years ago. Victor's head snapped up. Nathan placed a thin binder on the clerk's desk. The Hale Maritime Trust contains a contingency provision, buried, dormant, never triggered. He paused just long enough for the room to lean forward. Clause 17. Madeline laughed under her breath. Victor didn't. Nathan continued. Clause 17 states that if evidence emerges of criminal activity conducted by a trust administrator, and if a direct blood heir can be verified, all assets are immediately frozen and transferred to federal oversight pending investigation. The judge raised an eyebrow. That's unusually specific. Mr. Hale was an unusually cautious man, Nathan replied. Victor stood. This is irrelevant. There is no verified heir. Nathan turned, not to the judge, but to me. That's not correct. My pulse hammered, but my voice didn't shake. Your Honor, I said, standing. I submitted a DNA sample 48 hours ago. The room stilled. The judge looked to the clerk, a nod. A document passed forward. Results? The judge asked. The clerk swallowed. Confirmed. 99.9% probability. Ms. Elena Moore is the biological granddaughter of Robert Hale. The sound Victor made wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the sound of air escaping a sealed room. Madeline turned to him. You said this couldn't happen. Nathan didn't let the moment breathe. In addition, he said, we submit shipping logs, port surveillance, and sworn testimony from a former Hale Maritime executive. He nodded once toward the back of the room. Lydia stood. She didn't look at me. She looked straight ahead, shoulders squared, voice steady. For years, she said, medical aid shipments were rerouted through Crane Global Shipping. Containers labeled as emergency supplies were used to transport restricted technology. The laundering never stopped. Victor's attorney objected. The judge overruled. Nathan laid out the data, routes, timestamps, mismatched manifests. Patterns I recognized instantly, disasters exploited, systems abused, the same machinery I had spent my life trying to fix. The judge removed his glasses. Mr. Crane, he said slowly, given the evidence presented, this court orders an immediate freeze of all Hale Maritime Trust assets. Federal agencies will assume oversight effective now. Victor stood again, face flushed. This is an ambush. No, the judge replied. This is a safeguard your brother-in-law built in case someone like you ever sat where you are now. The gavel came down once. Charges followed fast. Fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Madeline's composure cracked first, eyes darting, breath shallow. Victor remained still, but his hands trembled against the table. The revised will was struck from record. Void. Just like that, decades of control collapsed. Not with shouting, not with drama, but with procedure. I sat back down, heart racing, vision sharp. For the first time, the system that had erased me was working exactly as designed. And I wasn't the anomaly anymore. I was the proof. When the paperwork was finished, the room felt empty. No applause, no victory speech, just silence and signatures drying on paper that transferred more money than I could comprehend. The clerk called me the sole heir. The phrase didn't land the way people expect it to. I didn't feel rich. I felt responsible. Everyone assumed I would step in, take control, become what Robert Hale had been. Another name at the top of a system built on distance and authority. That was the story they understood. Power inherited, power exercised. But that story had already failed too many people, including me. I dissolved my personal inheritance within weeks. Not quietly, not impulsively, deliberately. The assets were restructured, removed from individual control, and redirected into something that could outlast a single name. We called it the Hale Resilience Trust. Not a charity for appearances, a working system. It funds transition housing for young adults aging out of foster care, rapid response aid for disaster survivors who fall through bureaucratic cracks, emergency legal support for people trapped inside processes they don't understand until it's too late, the kind of help I needed long before I had the language to ask for it. Hale Point Estate changed too. The gates stayed open. The rooms where power had once been hoarded became training spaces, simulation labs, logistics floors, classrooms where people learned how to coordinate chaos without losing themselves inside it. No portraits, no monuments, just purpose. I walked through those halls one morning and watched a group of trainees argue over a supply allocation scenario. passionate, focused, human. None of them alone. None of them erased. That mattered more than any fortune. Lydia didn't try to reclaim a role she'd lost. She didn't ask for forgiveness or offer excuses. We spoke when we needed to. Sometimes about the work. Sometimes about nothing important at all. Healing didn't come in a single moment. It arrived in pieces, quietly, without ceremony. And that was enough. On my last night at the estate, I walked down to the cliffs alone. The Atlantic was restless, dark, and endless, the same way it had been when I first arrived. Only now it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like continuity. I held the falcon pendant in my palm, the metal warm from my skin. For most of my life, it had been a symbol of surveillance, proof that someone had been watching without intervening. Now it meant something else. Survival. Choice. The ability to see the system clearly and refuse to become its weapon. I let the chain slip back beneath my coat and faced the water. I was never just an orphan erased by paperwork. I was evidence that systems can be redesigned, that truth doesn't always arrive to punish. It sometimes arrives to rebuild. And if you've been listening from the beginning, all the way to the end, I want to say this. Wherever you are in the world tonight, I wish you a peaceful, warm, and gentle Christmas. May you feel seen. May you feel safe. May you remember that even the quietest lives carry stories worth telling. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe so you can hear more stories from women who survived, rebuilt, and chose something better. There are many voices still waiting to be heard, and this was just one of them.